right, everybody. Welcome back to Unraveling the Brain. Dr. Lauren Liming here with Infinity Functional Neurology and Dr. Josh Madsen. I have the pleasure today to speak with the Scott family. They brought their awesome little boy to us back in right around New Year's, right? Like we were actually open that full week. We took the week of Christmas off and we were here the full week of New Year's. And we were blessed to be able to see Theo at that time. And I was just looking back through Theo's charts, and it started with a phone call with me, and I was actually sitting in this chair. I have my notes right here on this table, and it's just like full circle, and it's really cool to see how he's improved. It's been really a joy to work with him. His initial intensive, where we did 2 weeks, and then this week he's really functioning at a high level. Tell me a little bit about your story, how you got here, things you've noticed. One thing I'd like to highlight too is this feedback he got from his teaching staff or teachers at school, and then we can get into a lot of different things because we got 4 kids here this week.
4 kids this week.
Yep, and
yes.
So they're all amazing in their own way. And I will kind of steer the conversation a little bit more Theo heavy because he has Down syndrome, and I always say a diagnosis never defines anyone, whether it's genetic, whether it's after an injury or something that can't be really controlled. But with Down syndrome, there's a lot of mitochondrial dysfunction. And that's one of the things that we can help support kids with. And so we see a lot of kids with mitochondrial dysfunction, but genetically, kids with Down syndrome have mitochondrial dysfunction. We need mitochondria to make energy for the brain. The brain needs that energy to really function and blossom and grow. And so he's definitely a functioning, blossoming, growing child. It's just something that it's like, hey, we can help him even more. So tell me again your story, Theo's story, what's been helpful for him, what you've noticed, and take it away.
Okay. So first and foremost, I'm a mom and I have 8 children. Theo was our super surprise little boy with Down syndrome. And pre his being born, I began exploring what can I do to optimize, to maximize, what he can do, how he can function in this world. And when he began schooling, we started to notice that there were moments where we were progressing, but then moments where we were really seeing regression. At most, we got to him having 3-word phrases. And so in first grade, I started having some concerns. When I was younger, I learned basic programming for computers. So what you start and you have the sequential input into the computer and this desired outcome. And if there's anything in that programming that's out of alignment, then you don't get the desired outcome. And so the same thing, I began wondering if that's what was happening with Theo. There were things we were inputting, but sometimes we were getting skewed results. And why? Why was this happening? So one day I was on Facebook and a video popped up of a boy that was here in your program that had he had an autistic diagnosis. And it was the beginning of his treatment and then 2 weeks later, the end of his treatment. And the results were profound. And I didn't know. I went onto YouTube, saw some more videos, and never saw a child with Down syndrome. Mostly saw children that had autism, and began wondering, is there something that can be done for Theo? Because I feel like there's something, like I was talking about the basic programming, there's signals that are going in there, but there is something that's not connecting properly. And we're not continually progressing forward. There's something that's happening that we're having this progression, regression. And so I contacted you and said, do you work with children with Down syndrome? And your first response was, I love them.
Yeah, they're my
some
favorite.
Of my favorites.
That's really my goal for this conversation is to reach families and parents of kids with Down syndrome because they're such a joy to work with and they respond so well. It's just it's so fun for us as a staff to work with them. And then it's so gratifying also because they do so well. I had a semi-local kid about a year ago, and it was almost the same thing. His teachers were like, "What did you do for those 2 weeks?
Right.
What was different?" And the mom was like, "I kind of had to change some of my parenting styles, just questions he was answering or asking me, some of the ways he was using his body, in more explorative ways." And Theo has been always, I think, a big explorative body kid. He's
Yes.
jumping and running.
Very physical.
That was new for this boy. But tell me about what changed for Theo, or the feedback that you received from
Right.
Theo after his first 2 weeks.
Right. So purposefully, oh, I'm sorry. You
Well,
seem
no,
a little
I just
exaggerated.
wanted to tell, because she kinda came to me and said, "Hey, I have this idea. I have this therapy." And she's trying to explain it, it's like, "You wanna do lasers?" It's
Yeah.
like, "What?"
What? Yeah.
So
On my kid? Yeah.
but the reason I was actually open to it is because, by this time we'd gone through all the, traditional medicine, right? But I also, like, kinda had an awakening during COVID, just, how I felt like our traditional medical systems were pretty messed up in kind of, just how they responded. I didn't expect perfection, early on, but as that whole pandemic played out, just the decisions that were made and how, like, there wasn't a lot of independence in doctors. And I realized that most of them now were employees of the hospital systems. And so if the system from the top said, "This is what you're gonna do," it's like you either lose your job, you lose your license, or you do this. And so even though I think there's a lot of good doctors, I think the system kind of forced them into, "You must do it this way." And I started realizing that there's a lot of things where that probably applies too. And so I started listening to a lot of podcasts just on, you know, things like I heard that doctors don't have to, as a part of their medical education, have nutrition classes as a part of their requirements, which is just crazy to me. I mean, it's like, how can you not have that as an important part of your medical education when that's what powers the whole secular system?
I
And
always say your kid's brain is made from the food they eat.
right.
Like, we might as well make it good
Anyway,
stuff.
so that's why I was open to, something that, traditional medicine would probably look at as crazy. And since talking with you, there's been research on this since the 1960s. There's tens of thousands of studies. And again, I don't have time or inclination to dive in on how well those studies have been put together. But I know that to traditional medical systems, just again, in my research, there's ways that you can put together studies to kind of almost force a particular outcome, one way or the other. And so it's like, okay, well, let's research this. I'm willing to invest the time and the effort and the money to do it. It's not covered by insurance, so it is definitely a cost. But uh, my suggestion was, let's go through it. Let's not expect like miracle, outcome, week 1 or 2. I mean, I know you have situations like that, but I kind of suggested to Rachel, you go, you do this with Theo, and then we'll do it for 6 months, and let's see kind of the results. And yeah, so there were some initial things that was helpful for me to kind of continue to stay on board. When he was here at the intensive, there's a first of all, just the principle behind what y'all are doing, it made sense to me. That if there are reflexes that are supposed to go away as you develop and they're still there, that there's something in the brain that is kind of interfering. I think one of the therapists said it's kind of like having someone like tap on you like all the time, and it's kind of hard to focus. And so if he had one of the reflexes where his toe would pop up, so every time he's stepping, there's something in his brain that's firing, and first of all, that's exhausting. But secondly, it probably takes a pathway. I mean, I'm just thinking it probably takes a pathway that otherwise would be doing something more better for him.
Higher level.
Yeah, and so that was the one thing from the first 2 weeks that we could visually see. Like, she took a video, she sent it to me of the reflex happening, and then y'all did lasers, and within a day or 2, it was gone, and
Yeah,
by
he
the end of the
responded
session
quick. Yeah.
by the end of the session, it was still gone, and 6 months later, it's still gone. So that was, like, the one thing that's like, "Okay, well, something happened there, so we invested in the laser to do it at home, and let's keep doing this." And there wasn't anything that just jumped out. It's like, "Oh, wow, he's speaking now," or "He's doing this." And it really, the confirmation for me as to what's going on underneath the surface happened when she went and talked to the teacher. So kind of send it back over to you on what happened.
Yeah, so, I'm going to backtrack just a little
Sure,
bit.
go
So,
for it.
as I said, we saw, the videos on Facebook with the children, and I'm not sure the correct way to say it, if it's a child with autism
Yeah.
or the proper way. But, wondering what would we see with Theo. But more so than that, I also know that the deepest desire of a parent's heart, of my heart, particularly with him, is to see progress. And I didn't want to have a placebo effect that I brought him. And because I thought you were doing something that would be helpful, I am therefore seeing that it is happening because I am willing it to do so. So purposefully, I kept people in a blind study, so to speak. That included his classroom teacher. Now, he is mainstreamed. He's pulled out periodically throughout the day, but he is in a mainstream classroom for his day. So his teacher was in the blind. And so we did the 2-week intensive, did not tell her what we were doing, just said, we'll be out of town for the first week of school. We were here for 1 week of vacation, and then the following week we missed 1 week of school. I brought him back to school. A few months later, had an IEP meeting and just a general catch up on how everything's going. So at the tail end of the meeting, once we had signed all the paperwork, I said to the teacher, so I'd love to hear about how Theo is performing in your classroom. And she said to me, I don't know what happened over winter break, but he came back a different child. And I said, well, can you expand upon what does different child mean to you? And she said, for example, excuse me, I would say to Theo, it's circle time. And Theo, without an assist, would get up and go and sit in his spot in the circle. And she said he was attending, whereas before he was very distractible. He was distracting the kids around him, but he wasn't focused. His attention was focused. He was following directions. And she said, one day I walked over to him and I reached my arm around him to, hand over hand, write the worksheet that was in front of him. And he looked at me and said, get back. Now, Theo only has, predominantly singular words. And those are not words that I've heard him speak before. So I was a little, taken back by that was what he chose to say. And she said, well, you didn't say it in a mean way. He was showing me with his hands, indicating he wanted me to go to my desk. And she said, so I thought, I'll give him a minute and see what happens. So I sat at my desk and I was trying to see around to see and he was doing something, but I couldn't see over his shoulders. She said, so I got up and I walked around I did a loop around, a circle around the classroom. And then I walked over and she said, he had done the worksheet and done it accurately. It was the capital letter H and the lowercase h. And he had tried to trace these letters and had done his best and had completed a worksheet independently. Never before had he done something like that. And I said, well, were there other things that you observed with him post-break? And she said, never before at recess had he ever engaged with any of his peers. He always played independently, went down the slide, would be on a swing, but he never interacted with the other students. And she said, he came back from winter break and over the course of the next few months, not only interacted with them, but joined in whatever play they were doing appropriately. So if they're playing hide and seek, if they're playing tag, he was in the throngs, right in the midst of everything. She said that carried over into the classroom, that when we would have time where a guest reader would come in and read, for example, or I'm presenting a lesson and they were allowed to choose a spot on the floor, that Theo would sit down and he would call a student by name and say, sit, and indicate that he wanted to have a peer, a particular person be with him. So we're seeing progress not only in independent work, in his ability to focus. We're seeing him, engaging with peers, having a social sphere added to his day. So she was so impressed. And so after that, I said, well, here's what we did, but I had not told her. So also we had an experience where, we shared with some of our relatives, but purposefully, again, some of our relatives we did not share with because we only see them every few months. So we just had a celebration in Texas where we got to see the family that we had seen before Theo came for his services here. So we saw them at Christmas and 6 months later saw them again. And the same kind of comments were being made. Wow, Theo is intentionally seeking to converse with people and to engage with them. He's sitting at the table while you're eating. He's appropriately following not only single step, but multiple step directions now. And I heard that this week. So we came back for a week this week and heard that from some therapists that worked with him previously.
Oh, yeah. He was easy to work with.
that he was so much easier to
he's
work
always
with.
great to work with, but it was easy this time. So
Right?
yeah.
And previously, when he was here for the 2-week intensive, I had to be with him. And I was aiding you in distracting him and getting him to sit still and getting him to attend to whatever you were doing or having the lasers put on. But this time, he didn't want me to be a part of it. I was not at any of his sessions this week. And I was hearing people direct him, okay, we're going to get up, we're moving to this room, or we're going to do this next activity. And Theo was getting up and he was going and he was doing. So it's a fantastic change.
I think to tie this all together, especially both of your perspectives and to explain how we saw those changes, the brain, I think of it as a supercomputer. I mean, it's far more advanced than any computer could ever be, but it needs data. The data is body awareness. Like, where am I coming from? Where am I going? Where are all my joints? Where are my extremities in space? Visually, is what I'm taking in visually stable, or is it not? From the vestibular system, do I know where I'm going? Like, am I going in a particular direction, at a particular speed? All of those are data points for the brain. Auditory processing. And so when we maximize those data points, we give the computer more consistent, more appropriate programming. So maybe rather than like a specific program, maybe the program's already there. It just needs different data. It needs more cohesive data. It needs more abundant and consistent data. I mean, we can never call the brain a computer, but for an analogy, similar how it works, especially the frontal lobe. This really requires all of those data points to be cohesive and to be sufficient to function at a high level. All of his improvements are in executive function. All the improvements that we see here and that we look for to monitor progress are neuromotor functions. Like, hey, who cares if our foot moves when we have this? But that's coming from the brain. And so when we don't have that reflex, that means the brain is working at a higher level. It means the cortex, the frontal lobe, is turning that reflex off. That's a great sign. So we get super excited. And I'm glad that you guys got excited about that reflex, because like, oh, my kid's foot doesn't doing up when we touch it, big deal. But it's like, hey, that's a neurological sign that says, okay, there's an issue and now there's not. And when you talk about that tapping, that disruptiveness, and how that could be for cognitive skills, that could be for social skills, that could be for motor skills, that could be for even eye tracking, because so much of the brain is devoted to movement and controlling the body and knowing where the body is, and because that's important. Knowing we're safe, knowing where we are, knowing how to control all of our limbs and eyes and spine, and all of those seem very basic, but they're actually very, very technical. And a lot of kids might skip steps that are necessary to develop those systems, especially when we have something genetic. A lot of times we see it with an injury or with a toxic exposure, with some sort of infection or inflammatory condition. It really doesn't matter what brings someone in, as long as we check them out that day and say, hey, this is what we need to work on now. This is how we can support them now. And the whole clinical model, like the whole Infinity model, is support the brain and then stimulate the brain, and support the brain and stimulate. And so that support could be hyperbaric oxygen. It could be supplemental oxygen. It could be photobiomodulation. It could be looking at functional labs, which we ran some genetic labs on Theo to look like, hey, how can we support detoxification and anti-inflammatory support, things like that. And then when the brain's in a more receptive position, therapy is more therapeutic. It sticks, it lasts, because he had received enough stimulus to his feet to inhibit that reflex hundreds of times over. Just the way he's bouncing around and running around. But there was something going on in the nervous system. And it really all comes back to cell level health and function within the brain. When we laser, we support that cell level health and function. The brain just becomes healthier. It's good for everybody. It's not the cure for anything, but it's helpful for pretty much anything neurological. And with Downs, with mitochondrial dysfunction being a component of that, I have so much confidence to say, hey, I'm going to point the laser here because I saw that reflex and I know that's coming from right here. I can make that area stronger, more functional, more connected. That then translates into more functional things that parents are looking for. Again, who cares if his toe doesn't doing up, but I care if the brain is functioning at a high level or not. And so when you talk about, Theo was going through the medical system in his really his prime developmental years. Those first couple of years are huge. And he was probably, would you call him a COVID kid, just based upon his age and like when he was born and Just
Yeah, he was
part of
born
that.
summer of 2018.
Yep.
So just a year and a half or so.
And so, I mean, any therapy at a young age is going to be beneficial. I think what makes this place really special is supporting the brain before stimulating the brain, and things just are more well received, more well integrated. When we balance those neuromotor systems, whether it's balance, body awareness, eye tracking, eye stability, that means the brain's functioning better. And so, we use those as our measures. We use those as our therapy model. But those do translate into functional life skills, executive function, socialization, focus, attention, independence, goal-directed behavior, impulse control. Like those are what bring people in most of the time. And they're like, they're checking my kids' feet, their hands, like big deal. But I'm like, those are all neurological tests that we do. And Theo changed fast, and so I had a lot of confidence. Like that reflex was textbook strong day one.
Yeah, that Babinski was day
Mhm.
one, and it was gone day one.
Yep, like later, like a half hour
It
later,
was
I feel
so
like, yeah.
quick. Yeah.
And so it's just like, okay, this is an energy production issue. It's not so much, hey, we have to put out this inflammatory fire. It's, hey, if we just boost energy production, the brain's going to catch right up. And so that gave me a lot of confidence to work with him. And then you're able to support him daily at home with the same lasers that we use in the clinic. And so you're just moving that needle. And part of it is, hey, kids are going to be kids. They're going to be rambunctious. Kids usually act out most around their parents, but it's really cool to see those improvements at school. And then with here, like just so he would march right back with me. I'm like, hey, Theo, it's time to go. And he'd stand up and walk and like kind of look back at dad and like, peace, dad. Like, I'm out of here. And then we'd work for 2 hours. There might be like 10 seconds where he'd want to like stay on the swing a little longer. And I'm like, no, we're going to move on. And he would just forget about the swing and move on and transition well. And so, kids are going to improve when they age. And I think that's maybe part of what we see, just a kid developing, 6 months later. But I honestly feel like any kid, we can help nudge that and just really, really increase that trajectory developmentally. And so
So if I may speak into that a little bit.
Please, yes.
So the questions have arisen from family, from people here that we've visited in the waiting room. How effective are the lasers and using that treatment at home? And, how do you know that the progress that you're seeing it isn't just, as you said, that developmental growth? We've got a half a year underneath our wings since you last saw him. And so I'm actually going to pass it to you a little bit
Okay.
to speak about another one of our children.
Yeah, we have 8 kids, and one of our older children, who's 26, she has had lung issues her whole life, pulmonary hypertension. Currently, she's on 24/7 oxygen just to oxygenate her blood to the level it should be. And so she yearly goes back to Boston to meet with the doctors who've been with her for 20 plus years now, and has a series of tests done that are just standard. And so we have a baseline of, the medication she's been on consistently for, more than 5 years, what those tests look like. And when things started noticeably improving for Theo, and it may have been after the teacher gave you that feedback, I was like, okay, well, let's kind of dive in. Let's see if there's something that, I mean, are these lasers going to help our Haley, who in her lungs, because she had a scheduled to go up there to Boston to get her test run in April, and it was maybe 2 weeks out. And Rachel called in. I don't know who she talked to. Was it
Dr.
Josh? Okay, and he said, yeah, like we've seen some positive results on lungs, and so he kind of told her what to do. And so we're like, okay, Haley, we got 2 weeks. We got the laser. Let's do your lungs twice a day, like he said, and it'll become like a A/B test. We won't tell anyone that we're doing this, and let's just see what comes of the.
You guys are stealthy.
I know of
Yeah.
the results. And so she went in. She was a first year teacher. Like she had a really stressful year, just a lot of just stress on her body, and going through what she went through. And this was her first year in the elementary school teaching, 5th grade. So it's just a lot of that had happened. So she kind of figured, maybe I'm not even going to have as good a test. It's just been a super stressful year. And so she went up, had the tests, and one of the tests is echocardiogram, or it's checking the pressures in her heart. And a normal pressure is 30. I don't know what the number actually means, but it's 30. And she has her last 5 years had been like 54 to 60, like always in that range. And the best that she had ever had was somewhere in the 40s, like when she was a junior or senior in high school, almost 10 years ago now. And they did the test and it came in at 42. And the doctors were just like, I don't know what happened, but, it's like, maybe the drugs are finally working, I mean, they didn't
5 years
have
later.
yeah, exactly. So, like, there had been no change in any of her protocols at all.
Tell him?
No.
No?
I didn't wanna have to spend the time to
Yeah,
kinda
explaining
explain.
why.
I actually because we only did it for 2 weeks, and so to me, that was just the next level of when Rachel's like, "I'd like to take these other kids to your for a week." And it was like, "You wanna take 4 of our kids to Infinity for a week?" I was like, "Okay." Well, now that I've got a little bit more confidence that something is going on. I've seen Theo. I've seen potentially a pretty big shift for, Haley. Um, let's see. So we're gonna she's here, and there's things that have been identified, this week that she can work on. So for a year, we'll do it, and then we'll see next year at her normal checkups. We'll see what has changed, and if things have substantially improved, then we'll talk to the doctors about what we've been doing for the previous year. So anyway, those were just encouraging things, and to me, it's just very interesting to be here and to it's one thing to see a video or hear someone else's story, but when it's your own story, it just kind of um, opens your eyes to things that I just think that there's a lot of things about the human body that, for whatever reason, our current medical system just overlooks or isn't interested in diving down for whatever reasons. And so one of our children, you could see you were testing the eyes, and as you're kind of as he's looking, his eye starts shaking. I mean, and that's not supposed to be there, but like when you can see that, and then at the end of the week you see, and now it's just like barely moving, and
More
if you just
stable. Yeah.
Almost.
and
Yeah.
it's I'm sure that as he continues to work on that, it's just he's going to be able to do exactly what the eyes are supposed to do. So, and just again going back to what I said earlier, it's just the hypothesis makes sense that if you fix these things that are supposed to behave in a certain way, you're going to free up energy for higher level things to be able to, function. So whether that's for a kid with autism or Down syndrome or a kid that has had a concussion or, you know, I just think that all those things it's worthwhile to make the investment, at least for our family.
So it's a perfect way to put it. And I can't even add anything to that. But I always say reflexes are in the way, but they're also indicators that something's in the way. Our goal is to work through both, get them out of the way and get the things out of the way that are keeping those reflexes there. But and that model applies to really all developing kids. Like we'll see adults with similar, neurological findings, and it might be post concussion, like you just mentioned. But the beautiful perspective, beautiful family, beautiful people. Thank you for giving us the opportunity. It's a joy to work with you all. It's an honor. It's as gratifying as I could ever imagine. It's feel like God has blessed this whole place and blesses the families that come here just because like our intentions are pure and we just want to see people become their best, especially kids. So thanks for sharing your time
we
and
appreciate it. Our daughter Haley was saying that it is such a joy to be here, that you can feel the love from the entire staff and how they interact with each other, but that they really have just their focus and their intentions are so pure and so good, and just that you love on every child that's here, and that she just feels that walking in
I
here.
can feel that from your family too. Because like when kids are doing therapy and Theo walks by, they're so excited. Hi, Theo, listen. Okay, good job, Theo. See you later, Theo. Like they're just like they're so you could tell they love each other and you could tell that they're loved. So great work, guys.
I told one of the doctors, I was like, this place. First of all, our children, like Haley said, I have hope, right? So when you hear your kids say that, that's just really beautiful. But also just the way that your staff interacts with individuals, and I've seen it with other families. It's not just with our family. I think one of the ways I described it to Dr. Ashley, I said, you are competently competent, right? I mean, there's just like a competency here that just oozes out of the people that we have interacted with, from Dr. Josh to you to Dr. Ashley and the therapist as well. So
Good.
So thank you for
Appreciate it.
using your time and talents to
Yeah.
help our children
It's an honor. It's
to
an
just
honor.
optimize their potential.
Yeah.
It's just great.
Thanks so much, guys.
You're welcome.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. God bless you all 10 of you. My goodness, that is a crew.